Hi, Mitzi.
Hi, Fiona.
How
Wow,
are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Oh, it's so nice to meet you. I'm so glad you could join me.
Yeah, no, nice to meet you too. How did we connect again? Was this through?
I was looking for people on Instagram and I searched people with the hashtag like
That's
life
right.
stories, and you were
Ah,
brave enough to reply to my message.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I love storytelling. I think hearing other people's stories is amazing.
Absolutely. That's how we learn about each other. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just so thrilled that you could join me. And I think it's kind of blowing my mind because I feel like I'm almost talking to somebody from the future because you're in here in tomorrow. I still can't wrap my mind around it. It's very
Yeah, it's a bit
interesting.
crazy, isn't it?
I'm excited to get to hear about your life and to see what kinds of insights you have that might help other people, and to talk about your exciting new venture with your podcast. So let's dig into it. I did go and listen to your podcast. I listened to a little bit of it, but I did not listen to anything that would predispose me to learning about your life. So like if there were episodes that had to do with your story, I did not listen to the whole thing. And then on your website, I checked that out, and I also didn't go into your like about me page because I just wanted to have it
Mhm.
be very fresh, not knowing anything about you at all. So I thought that would be more fun.
Yeah, that's
So
cool.
I like to start by asking people to give us a little snapshot of where you are right now, today, in this time.
Yeah, so right now I look up there because right over the road is the beach, and I'm very much a beach girl, and what I've wanted actually moved back to the area that I grew up in, but I've moved away. I've lived overseas for a long time, and never really expected to come back to where I am now, but I absolutely love it. And I am literally a stone's throw from the beach. If I'm in my bedroom and I look out, all I can see is the sea. So it's like being on a cruise ship sometimes.
That's
And then I look
beautiful.
over to the city and I can see the cruise ships that are starting to come back in again after the COVID season and things. So I honestly I wake up every day just so grateful for where I am, the area that I live. I get to see the beach and walk on the beach pretty much most days, and we're just coming into summer, so I can't wait to get back in the sea again. So that's kind of physically where I'm located right now.
And we should say that you're in New Zealand.
Yeah, I'm in New Zealand, which can probably come through on the accent.
Yes, it does.
And then I'm also a life coach. And things are kind of changing a little bit in terms of, it's something we can call ourselves anything we want, I believe.
Mhm.
I'm not one for titles.
Yep.
So I thought, well, life coach just sort of, you've got to give yourself a title because people compartmentalize us.
Mhm.
So I thought, well, life coach just sounded a bit boring. And there's so many life coaches out there. And I was like, well, what is it I do as a life coach? What is it that I do? So it's midlife women that I coach. I help them create a vision for their life. And through that vision, they literally have transformations. So I'm now calling myself a midlife visionary and transformation coach, which just felt really fitting for being able to describe more of what I do than just saying I'm a life coach.
Yeah, I love that because I think that the term life coach maybe has become a bit cliche in some
Mm,
ways, and so you're putting some specifics on it. Lets people know, like if you're looking for a therapist, for example, you would look for a therapist that specializes in something, marriage counseling or children's and adolescent counseling or something like that. So it's sort of the same thing, is that people are able to say, "Wow, I'm working with a visionary." I love that.
yeah. And that's been something that's been really big for me is being able to, I never did for a long, long time, never had goals, never had a vision, and was just, I guess, drifting in a way.
Mhm.
So that was, for me, was life changing when I suddenly started setting goals for myself. And this wasn't, I'm in my 50s now, and this wasn't until my early 40s that I started doing that. Yeah. So
Intentionally,
that's
like with an intention of
with
setting a goal. Yeah.
yeah, intention. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly that.
that's so relatable. I know so many people who later in life they find that calling to goals or to more specific goals or to changing the goals. And so that's very interesting to me, so especially since I'm
Hmm.
probably about your age. So
Yeah, yeah.
so that's cool. So did you find that that is something that that caused you to switch careers now later in life, or were you always in that space of helping others?
I've always worked within the property industry.
Oh,
So one of my first roles was like, back in the day we were sent off and the only thing I was sort of offered was secretarial college or nursing. And I don't like blood, so I don't really have much more of a choice. So I went off to secretarial college, and I just thought I was so embarrassed to tell people that that's what I did. I never felt enough in saying I'm a secretary, and they go, oh yeah, well, great,
So you decided later in life to do something that was more heartfelt, more purpose driven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I literally went on a property trajectory from being a secretary. I just always wanting more. Went on to work in the legal industry doing conveyancing. The contract side of selling houses might be quite different where you are.
So when you say property, that would be like real estate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking the same language.
Yes, the same language, just a little bit of a different vernacular, right?
Yeah.
So interesting. I love that. Because words are our superpower.
Oh,
and
yeah,
really being able
absolutely.
to understand each other is so cool.
Mm.
Great. That's very interesting for you to have made that shift. Let's go back and see if we can go with you on the road that brought you to where you are now, to making that shift. I want to go back and talk about where you were born and
Wow, yeah.
how, right from the very beginning, and what was going on at that time, and maybe just take us from the beginning, and we'll see if we can go with you on that walk.
Sure. Well, I mean, the very first part, and the first thing that comes to me is I was born a blue baby.
Okay, so what does that mean?
So I was born with my umbilical cord around my neck.
Oh.
So I was having trouble breathing. So, I mean, obviously I don't have any recall of any of it, but
Right. Wow.
It could have been that I was whisked away quite urgently to, be helped. And I've always had this, I remember my mother telling me that when I hurt myself, I'd just hold my breath, and she'd have to like literally shake me to let it release the hold, to let whatever was going on move through me. Again, when I was about 8 years old, I had a near drowning experience.
Wow.
And again, that's, this is me having pieced these pieces together, I guess, over the years, that again, that was, going under the water and having to catch my breath and that whole thing. So breath's been a big thing for me. And even now I have to be very conscious of breathing deeply and fully and going through a whole process if I catch myself holding my breath, which I still do. But yeah, I mean, I had a great childhood. I grew up here by the sea.
In New Zealand. So right there by the sea in New Zealand.
Yeah. Where I live, it's like,
sounds like a fairy tale, actually.
Oh yeah, I mean, my parents are actually Scottish, so they lived in very different life. But my father was in the Navy, and he decided he wanted a better life for his family. And my mother and him, my mother with a 4-year-old, she was 6 months pregnant on a ship for 6 weeks, coming out to New Zealand back in the 60s. So
wow.
Yeah, that was their vision, to leave everything behind and come out and start a better life for us here. And for me, I've been back to Scotland many times, and I just go, oh, thank you, Mum and Dad. Thank you so much for.
It's very cold there, very green, but very cold.
Yeah, even in summer.
Yes.
That was their vision, and we ended up living by the beach. And we're at the bottom. I don't know if you know New Zealand, but there's 2 main islands, and the city that I live in is literally on a horseshoe. So we're on a harbour. So wherever you go, there's always water. There's a river, just up the road as well. So yeah, growing up here, we got up, went to the beach, came home, ate some food, went back to the beach, came home, had dinner, went back to the beach, came home, went to bed. And that was our summer holidays. We just lived, we were 2-minute walk from the beach, and that's what we did. Childhood, I mean, it was great. What better way for a child to grow up? It was
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A couple of things that strike me. The first thing is I talk about this with my partner all the time, as we say, why did our parents settle us here? Because I live in Pennsylvania in the United States, and it's, we have all the 4 seasons, but it does get very cold. It's very beautiful in a lot of ways, but it gets very cold in the winter. We always wonder, why here? Because there are so many more beautiful places. The idea of living at the beach is like a dream. It's like a fairy tale. It's beautiful. And your parents realized that early on, that they wanted that for their family. So you had this wonderful environment. So what about your school life, things that you would do outside of that playtime?
Again, living here, it was we just played in the streets, because, and even now kids still do, because it's quite a safe area. So the kids just roam around. But I spend a lot of my time, I was actually a gymnast for a very long time, from, I don't even remember what age I was when I started, but probably around 6 or 7 maybe. So if I wasn't in my togs, which what we call bathers swimsuit,
Okay.
I was in a leotard doing gymnastics, and even up to a few years ago, I'd still be doing cartwheels and handstands and the splits because it was
Wow.
I used to drive my mother mad because I'd be diving over the furniture and doing
Okay.
gymnastics up and down the hallway. So that
Wow.
was very much a large part of my childhood, was spent as
Physical
a gymnast.
recreation and time in nature. Like the idea of
Yeah.
living so close to the ocean, I think it must have given you a lot of connection to like a sense of, for me, when I'm at the ocean, it gives me a sense of power, like the power of
Mm,
the ocean and the earth and mother nature, and like,
yeah.
it really gives you a sense of place, like I'm this tiny little speck in this
This
big world
fast.
of power, right?
Mm.
So how do you think that influenced you, being so close to that, all that power and that beautiful ocean?
Yeah, I totally hear what you say, because as I say, I walk the beach most days and I look at the sea, and I see it as such a reflection of us. Like some days it's beautiful and calm, and
Hmm.
other days you get that real rough. We've had the last few days, it's been really strong winds and the sea has just been pummeling in. But I see it as a reflection of us, because
Hmm.
we have those calm days and we also have those days where we're like, what's going on, kind of thing. But the calm always comes after those stormy days.
Hmm.
And just seeing the changing landscapes of the tides, the ebbs and the flows, and the sea, the sand beds, and how the tide will come right in and then it goes again, and what it leaves behind. And I'm always scouring the beach for shells or seeing things that are washed up on the shore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree with you. There is such power
Hmm.
in nature, and
Yeah.
just being able to be in the elements.
And the metaphor, and realizing how old do you think you were when you realized the metaphor of that?
Oh, I think just more recently. Yeah. I've always been drawn to the sea. Wherever I travel in the world, I have to find water.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I think it was more in recent years. I've gone, this is
Hmm.
more the connection between, we are part of
Oh yeah,
nature. We're
absolutely.
all one, and yeah.
It's all right. We're all shared energy. I mean, it's all
Yeah. Where for
very
so long
interesting.
it's been like a separateness, hasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. It's nice to be able to acknowledge that oneness and really notice it, and be able to live in a place where where it's in your face, that oneness with nature and with one another. So I'm happy for you that you get to do that. That's really great.
And we actually have the bush right behind us as well.
Wow.
So we get both. Like literally as a kid, we'd be going on bushwalks and along the tracks and things like that, which I still do, but I'm more drawn to the sea than the bush. But my house is, where I'm living now, is set right into the rocks
Okay.
of the hill. And then there's like a road, and there's the beach. It's
Okay.
just amazing.
Wow. All right. So as you're growing up, and you're obviously the influence of the environment was huge. What about other people in your life? Your parents were obviously a big influence on you. Talk a little bit about that. The people that you maybe grew up with as a child that might have influenced you as well.
Yeah, I've always had. I'm still actually really close friends with two other Fionas, and we grew up here. We've known each other probably since primary school.
Okay.
And we've always remained in touch. We've traveled the world together, and we're still very close friends, even though we've lived in different countries at certain times and everything else. So we're all on our different journeys, but we still come together and reconnect. I've always had a lot of friends, and even coming back to live here, there's still people I went to primary school with. We just go, and reconnect again. So that's quite funny. Definitely my parents were a big influence. Just the bravery of what they did,
Hmm.
having, making that choice way back to make a better life for their families, as I was saying. And also, my mother passed about 5 years ago after a cancer journey, and just seeing her bravery through that, she's such a strong Scottish woman, she's just a hard, brave
Oh,
heart.
well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, but I see it. It's all, like we talked about, sort of like the ebbs and flows. It's birth and death are all part of the cycle of life. And my mother's sister as well. Actually, she lived in Scotland, and she was blind from a very young age from the war. And she went on to do amazing things in her life. She went to university. She would teach people sign language, and if they were deaf and mute, she would be called in to interpret, and she would interpret on their hands. And she had a ring, and so people got to know her by the ring. They could feel her ring and they knew it was her, which gave them great comfort. She wrote poetry, and her and my mother would write letters, one week, one the other, religiously. And she was doing it on a Braille typewriter, and staying with her, and we'd be driving along the road, and she'd go, "Oh, if you look to your left now," and I've been driving for 40 minutes, and she'd go, "Oh, if you look to your left," and we're like, "Huh?" How does she know? But she just had this other scent in her, kind of thing. So just seeing her and the way she lived her life. She went to university, and I just thought, wow, we sort of take our side, I guess, for granted, but she just carried on and lived a great life regardless.
Wow, what a strong influence. That's incredible. Your dad was in the Navy, you said? Or in the English Navy or the Scottish Navy, right?
Yeah,
And
British
so
Navy, yeah.
British Navy. We didn't know this about each other, but my mom is from the UK too. And she also passed from cancer.
It's a journey, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So I can relate. And so you went to primary school in New Zealand. How old are you when you finished primary school in New Zealand?
So you go from 5 to about 12, and then we go on to what we call high school.
And you established some strong friendships in primary school that you still have today. So you have those lifelong friends, which is also really wonderful. And then you went to high school in New Zealand, presumably, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about those years. What sticks out? Was there any stories, experiences, good, bad, influential from those years of adolescence?
It's funny because my daughter, she's 14, so she's in her second year at high school. So we have 5 years. And it's just like looking at a miniature version of myself. She's at the school I went to. She didn't go to the primary school I went to, but she's at the high school I went to. And just seeing her in the uniform, I just do these double takes because it's just looking at a past version of myself. But again, I was just the sporty one. I did okay academically, but I was too interested in sport. It put me on a field, or even then I was still doing gymnastics. I played hockey, I played netball, I played basketball, I played tennis, and some of them I played representative level. That was my thing. Put me on a sports field, I was absolutely in my element, but put me in a classroom to have to put my hand up to talk would scare the living daylights out of me.
Really?
Yeah, I was all my school reports say how shy I was. So for me to be here today talking to you, I've come a long way.
You have. So you were very shy in school, known to be shy, but really shined in athletics and obviously being able to just get outside and be at the beach and those sorts of things. Okay.
And looking at it, I think it was because when I was on doing a gym display or something, I didn't have to use my voice. Because I'd grown up in the time of children should be seen and not heard. On the sports field, I didn't have to use my voice. I could just play hockey or softball or whatever sport it was. So I wasn't having to express myself.
That's making me wonder how that might relate to the cord around your neck experience.
Yeah.
Not just breathing, but also verbal expression like talking.
Yes.
What else do you notice about the parallels with your daughter? Anything that it brings back for you?
Not so much parallels, but seeing her, she is just her own self. She's such a teacher to me. She'll say to me, "Mum, this is my journey." And I go, "Whoa, where did that come from?" But I love that she knows at such a young age that this is her journey. And I just allow her to dream as big as she wants to dream. And I don't squash anything down. If she tells me she wants to go and be Prime Minister, I'm all for her doing that, whatever it is for her. And she's got some pretty big dreams. And I love that she's never been a follower. So she's always been not so much a leader, but she just doesn't follow. So she is just very much in her own self, being her own authentic self. And at such a young age, for so long, if I go back to primary school, back in the gym hall, I overheard one of the parents tell my gym coach that Fiona's not good enough to be included in the team. And that stuck with me. Those words stuck with me right through again to my 40s, which was when I sort of started on my personal development spiritual journey, was triggered. I hadn't realized how deep those words had been ingrained in me. I can still vividly see me being in the hall and seeing my gym coach and seeing this parent and hearing those words. And it's literally just down the road from me now. And so that I've used that more recently to actually propel me, whereas for so long those words had held me back.
And they stick with you. I just was thinking about this today, is that someone that I know wrote something about their own childhood and something that stuck with them. And I've been thinking, obviously, because of what I'm doing with my podcast, I'm thinking a lot about that. And the stories of childhood and what things stick with you, of all the thousands of things that happened to you as a child, and only a select few, 3, 4, 5 things maybe stand out and stick with you until you figure out not just what it's trying to teach you, but how to rumble with that and get it to really take hold and fit and transform it into something new as an adult, which is so fascinating. So that's a very hurtful experience. And I can remember when my kids were little, hearing other parents talk about other kids and thinking how wrong that is, how hurtful that is. That always stuck with me. I would never have said something about anyone else's child, especially not publicly or to a coach. And that seemed so mean.
Yeah. I mean, she could have been having a bad day, or
exactly.
she was worried that her daughter might not have got into the team or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I didn't have that sort of knowing that that could have been going on at the time.
Yeah.
But all I remembered was Fiona is not good enough.
And you heard that
carried
voice.
And just carried that with me all the way through. And like we said earlier, the power of words, and it's so true. They're our thoughts, they're our beliefs. They create everything about what's going on.
They have energy. They have great power.
Yeah.
It's
and the fact that we can write letters that form words that become chapters of a book, or we're absorbing it all. It's just amazing. I love all that.
I know, when you start thinking about it, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
It's so profound. I know, exactly. I feel the same way. That's crazy. So high school, and then you still have your parents, and you're still in your family home there in New Zealand?
No, my father actually passed when I was 18, very suddenly.
Wow, I'm sorry. Would you
be
able to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, him and I'm pretty vulnerable. I'll speak, but him and I weren't getting on at the time. I was 17, 18, and there was an incident that happened. He caught me out very late at night with a boy in a car. It was very, we weren't up to too much. But it was him protecting me, which I've come to learn since. But, he was very angry at the time, and I wasn't allowed to see this guy again. And so my way of reacting was to shut him out, because he was taking something away from me. And so we just I just blocked him for a while, never thinking he'd not be there for much longer. So that was very sudden, very unexpected. It was just massive heart attack that he passed from. So it's probably, I remember one of my first jobs and receiving a reference or something, and one of the partners at the law firm I worked at saying Fiona belies her age, her maturity is way beyond her years, kind of thing. And I think that was very much a growing up phase for me. I was the only one still at home with my mum, and so in a way I became her strength. I'm actually the age she was. I'm the age now that she was when my dad passed.
Yeah.
So that's been quite a big, she always appeared old at the time,
Yep.
But so this was in the 80s, late 80s, that my dad passed. I've had to go through a lot of forgiveness for myself,
self-forgiveness,
and forgiveness for him. And I can still even feel the emotion coming up now talking about it. There's nothing I can do to change what happened, but I've learned from those experiences, and I know that the things he did was purely to protect me. I was his youngest of 3 girls. I was kind of the blue-eyed, both of us were blue eyes. We were, I was his blue-eyed girl. And I never wear blue, actually, and I've got a blue top on.
Aww.
There you go.
See? Everything matters. Everything's got a purpose.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for your vulnerability and sharing that story. I'm sure that continues to have a lot of significance in your life, and probably things will come up around that forever. I think the thing you mentioned too about the age, because that struck me, because my mom was 56 when she passed away of lung cancer, and I just turned 56. And so when you start thinking about age parallel with something that's traumatic in your life, it brings things back to the surface. And so you having an age parallel parallel with your mother and that age, it's interesting how that may be shining through in your life right now, and what kind of things it'll be able to teach you over this year. Like maybe there's some significance there and some things that will, have great benefit.
Even when she passed, I remember her, we would talk. She would end up in the hospice, and we would talk, and she would talk of the things she never got to do. And so that was very enlightening for me. I was like, I've got to be doing more. She didn't, she lay in her hospice bed and said she had never had a massage, and she was in her 80s. And then there was a knock on the door and a lady came in and she said, oh, I'm a massage therapist and I'd wondered if you'd like a massage.
Wow.
And she just massaged her hands, and it was just so beautiful. And the smile on my mother's face as she was lying there in her dying days, she got her
massage
wish of a
she
massage.
Put it out there again, the words.
Yeah,
she put the words out there.
Well,
that's the way it works.
Totally. Because another part of that is too, she said to me one day, she said, I never got to have my 5 minutes of fame. And there she is lying on her hospice bed, very beautiful. It's like a home in beautiful gardens, and she had a room with double doors out onto the deck outside. It was a beautiful place, and here she was saying she never had her 5 minutes of fame. Another knock on the door. Somebody was listening.
Absolutely.
A TV crew walk into my mother's room and said, we're doing a documentary about the hospice and wondered if you would be happy to be interviewed. And so there she was, put some lipstick on me, and she got her 5 minutes of fame. But as it was, she got to watch the show before it was actually aired on TV. And every night we would, we thought, oh, tonight will be the night it'll be on. And we'd all turn up in her room and we'd sit and we'd, oh, not tonight. And then she passed, and about 4 days later, it was aired on TV. But that was just special.
Very special. That is crazy. That's just crazy. I love when things like that happen. Those serendipities, I live for those things. There's just because it shows you that there is something at work that is so much bigger than us. People who notice it, like I think you and I are probably very much alike, that we notice that. I think there's a lot of people that go through life and they just never see those things. They don't notice them. And I don't know what it is where some people are, able to feel
too
it.
much in the head, or you saying that too. Like growing up, I was always called lucky because I was always finding money in the gutter. My father was always taking me down to the local police station to hand it in because it was kind of, big money. I'd find back in the day when people got paid in brown envelopes, and I'd find pay packets on the side of the road. And so, with a lot of money in. And so my father was always taking me to the police station to hand it in. And, if nobody claimed it, I got it back, kind of thing. And it went on that I remember going to my sports clubs and they'd have raffles and everyone would just say, oh, Fiona will win it. And sure enough, I would.
Wow. And why do you think that is? What is it that makes you, quote, lucky?
Those times, it was like I just had this inner knowing, this feeling, an inner knowing that it was going to happen. Because I even went on to, I'd enter a competition I remember winning lingerie sets and flights and hampers and all sorts of things. And when I was 15, a family friend came around and she was selling raffle tickets for her netball team. I was a student. I didn't have any money. And so I said, I'll buy a $2 one because that's all I had. You could buy a book of 10 or one for $2. And I said, I'll buy the one for the car. I've got $2. And then she went out to see my dad, who was out in his workshop, and she said to him, he goes, I'll buy one, but I want the one for the car. And I said to Dad, I've already won the car. And do you know what happened?
You won the car.
I won a car at 15.
That is crazy. And do you think it's because you just had that, you didn't have the thing that blocks us. When you're young, you don't have that, maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe you didn't have it. So do you still win a lot of things now?
I went on to probably in my 30s still. I remember being at a work conference and it was flights to overseas travel. And I was like, that's mine. And sure enough, that was mine.
And that's what they say about the, all the law of attraction gurus. That's exactly what they say is you have to have the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the feeling that it's already yours. And you just have no problem with that. I love that. You have to teach that to me.
It is just that I just feel it. Like I can feel it sitting there, and I just know it would be, my name would be called, or
It was yours.
the car was a big shock.
Okay.
But I remember saying to my dad, I've already won that, with such conviction that he bought the one for the bed or something.
Okay.
And even, I've gone on and I've had jobs where people always, would say, oh, you always landed lucky, you land lucky even in your jobs, kind of thing. One of the companies that I worked for, all the companies I've worked for have always been into having big elaborate kind of functions and things like that, and I've done had some of the most amazing experiences through the jobs that I've worked in. Even down to one of my last positions, it was normal for us to jump in a helicopter and fly somewhere for lunch to a luxury lodge, and that became a norm.
It sounds great.
And it was so much fun, and it was like, everyone's like, oh, you're so lucky. I remember when I went for that job, I had 2 job offers. One was with the government position, and this one was in a private sector. And I just thought, when I'm envisioning both, this one just had a far better feel to it. And I went with the feeling rather than thinking about which would be better for me.
Mm-hmm. Go with the feeling. That makes sense. Let's go back just a bit, just from the period then after your father passed, and then you were about 18. So take us through like your 20s.
The year Dad passed in the February of 88. Later that year, might have been about August, September, I went on my first overseas trip with a couple of girlfriends, and we went to Bali and Singapore. I hadn't really been on a plane much before that. It just opened my eyes to so much more. I think seeing particularly different cultures, the Balinese, such beautiful culture and their traditions and their rituals and things like that. Again, being by the sea. And then later that year, my sister and I decided we'd go to the UK, and we went on a one-way ticket. And it was very hard because we were leaving Mum behind on her own, but she was like, no, you can go. She gave us our blessing to go. We ended up actually nannying over there. I had been working for a law firm here, and one of the partners said he actually lined up a job for me with Sony Music as a secretarial kind of role. I didn't feel good enough to go for it. It was in central London, and little Kiwi girl, arrived in the big smoke and was like, overwhelmed by a lot of what I was seeing there. And I was like, oh, I really don't know. And I tossed and I turned, do I, don't I? And it always reminds me of one of those kind of sliding door moments of, have you ever seen a film with Gwyneth Paltrow?
Yes.
And I always think to myself, I wonder how different my life would have been if I'd taken the Sony Music job compared to going into a nannying job. But with the nannying job, I had 3 young children that I nannied, and it was beautiful. They lived in the centre of London, and we had this big, beautiful home. The mother shopped all day and would come home exhausted because she'd been shopping all day, and she'd come and sit on my bed and sit and drink a whiskey with me. And I didn't drink whiskey but every night she brought me a whiskey with water and ice, and she would sit there like little schoolgirls, on the end of the bed chatting. One of the children actually went to the kindergarten that Lady Di taught at, and they had a house in the country in Oxfordshire. They had a house on the grandparents' estate, and the estate, when I say the estate, the monstrous houses that had absolutely everything, the servants, everything. And again, this little Kiwi girl rocks up. She landed lucky, that girl.
Sounds like it.
I'd hear that often. Yeah, she landed lucky. So that was a real journey the first time being over there. And I spent 6 months nannying and 6 months traveling and visiting family, meeting my family, a lot of them for the first time in Scotland.
So then what happened after that?
I spent a year in London, and then a girlfriend rang me and she said, will you be my bridesmaid? I didn't have the money to come home, so it was a phone call to Mum, if you want me home, can you pay? Good old Mum. So I came home, and I really didn't settle that well coming back then, about 5 years. So, I just got on, and I was working in a okay job. And I remember one day, it was one summer, and quite a few friends after they'd been at university then went on and travelled. And a few of them had come home one summer, and they were talking about Italy and different places. And I was like, oh, I didn't go there. Oh, I didn't get to do that. Oh, so within 6 weeks, I packed up my flat, moved everything back to Mum's, sold my car. I wasn't in a relationship, and I bought a one-way ticket and headed back to the UK.
I mean, freedom. That's like freedom.
Yeah.
So you went back to London, and then what did you do there?
Second time back, I actually started working. I was doing secretarial temping
Mhm.
around, and again, I was working in law firms. But before I'd left, I'd started doing some law papers because I was knew there was something more for myself. So I was always learning. I had 2 papers left to do, 6 months of 2 papers left to do. So I was telling my daughter the story the other day, how I actually ended up having to sit in a room on my own in the middle of London with a moderator from the law faculty over there while I sat my last 2 papers for my New Zealand qualification. So that was quite an experience.
That is fun. And then what were you qualified to do after that?
So we call it legal executive or paralegal. And so that was me working in property, doing conveyancing, real estate, property side of contracts.
Okay. Did you keep working in London?
In a firm that I was working for, one of the partners came to me one day. He goes, "I've just come across your CV. What are you doing? You should be doing this." And he created a job for me because he saw my potential. And, for that, I'm so grateful that it's sort of to have somebody say to you, there's so much more you could be doing.
So it's the opposite of what the parent did back in your elementary school.
Yeah.
Instead of saying Fiona's not good enough to do this, he said Fiona's much better. She should be doing more. So how long did you stay?
So I was there for 10 years. And in one of the law firms I was working in over there, I met my husband, who's now my ex. He's English. And one day he said, let's go home. And I said, what do you mean? Where's home? And he wanted to come back to New Zealand. So
your daughter was born in New Zealand?
She was born about 3 years later.
So what were you doing at that time then?
I'd come back and I was working for a real estate company, but again, in more sort of a marketing personal assistant type of role. Because what I really wanted to do was go on and do real estate sales. But I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to have kids, I don't really want to be building a career to then go into motherhood and leave it all behind after a short time, just not knowing, how soon I may or may not fall pregnant. So I went into that role sort of seeing it as quite a stepping stone, but absolutely fell in love with it. Thought, this is it. I'll never leave here. This is the job for me. The people were amazing. It was a small company of franchise within a large company. Just every day was so much fun. But it was interesting because it was predominantly men that I worked with, about 3 or 4 women, and the rest were all males. So it was quite a male-dominated world. But lots of fun. And that was the helicopter lunches and all the rest.
Great. You've really enjoyed everything you've done. I haven't heard you say anything that you've done that you haven't enjoyed.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have had a pretty good life, really. Yeah. There's been, something I didn't mention when I did live in London was I was actually mugged living there, which was a bit of a catalyst for us coming home. I was, knocked out from behind, big egg left on the back of my head, landed on my hands and knees, broke all my molars, and was left unconscious on the pavement, which has had a huge impact on my life.
Oh, I can imagine.
So there has been, as we say, the ebbs and flows. It was like, I kind of laugh about it and that it was very much like the universe was trying to redirect me at that time in my life, and yet I wasn't listening.
And so it has to hit you over the head.
It was literally, hitting me over the head.
What was
to get me to listen?
Well, what do you think it was trying to tell you?
Little did I know, but the husband proposed to me about 6 or 8 weeks later, and even when I said yes, I knew I shouldn't have been. Even on our first date, something happened and I wasn't listening, and so but he has been such a teacher for me in terms of, I believe one of my biggest lessons I'm here to learn is self-love, which probably started right from birth. Hearing that I wasn't good enough. It was very much a Jekyll and Hyde, what I was getting in our marriage. And I didn't like, one side of it was great, the other side of it, not so great. Not something I really talk about publicly, just, to protect my daughter, really.
Sure.
And I just wasn't listening. That's what it feels when I really go deep and reflect on what was going on in that time of my life. It was, I feel like it was a redirection and I just wasn't listening.
I mean, it's crazy how that happens. I can relate to that. So you came back to New Zealand, your daughter was little, and then, so at some point the marriage dissolved.
Yeah, she was about 7.
After that, you were a single mom.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that like?
It was a big change for me, because I remember, as soon as it was me who decided to leave the marriage. I asked him to leave because I didn't want to leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
It was our, family home. Excuse me. That's me. Him.
There you go. That's
It's all
right.
coming up.
The universe.
Yeah.
Hello, universe.
Yeah. Here we go. You're going to talk about it. He wouldn't leave. And so we actually lived in the same house for about a year, which wasn't easy, but it kind of worked. I mean, otherwise we were paying a mortgage and him paying rent, which suddenly makes quite a difference to your financial situation. And for me, the hardest part was breaking the family unit. I'd never seen myself as a single mum, but I just knew it was what I had to do. My self-worth and my self-love which I realised later, was so low. But I needed the lessons that I learned within that marriage. Although it took me down, the lessons from what I've learned from it brought me back up. And I've learned self-love, and I've learned self-worth, which has given me self-confidence, and my life's just been so different. It's changed in so many ways.
When you look back, would you say that when you were a child and into your adolescence and doing all those really cool things that you did, going to London, and would you say that you did not or did have more self-love? When was the shift that you feel like you didn't have self-love?
I'd say self-worth was probably always quite low. Self-love, yeah, again, it was never something I knew of.
But you thought of yourself as lucky, but not.
But yeah, but I
didn't love yourself.
No.
And that's interesting, because hearing you say that, it makes me feel like other people probably would have had no idea, because they thought of you as lucky Fiona. They probably thought you were on top of the world. I mean,
and it's seeing things from the outside. What's going on inside can be so different, isn't it?
Absolutely. Everything is about perception.
Mm-hmm.
So your daughter is now 14, you said, and you have a new career as a life coach or a visionary. How's it going? What's going on?
So I did eventually go into real estate sales.
Oh, okay, you did.
just to finish that tiny little bit.
Yes.
And that was shortly before I became a single mum. About 2 years prior, I finally went into real estate sales, left the company I thought I was never, ever, ever going to leave. I was like, oh, finally, because I remember seeing a local real estate agent when I was about 8 and thinking, oh, she's got a cool life. She gets to go around houses every day,
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been property, something I love. I love interior design. I love architecture. I love all of that kind of thing. I'd walk around London with my head up, looking at all the beautiful, amazing buildings, and everyone else is on their phones or looking down. So I did eventually go into real estate sales, absolutely loved it. But as a single mum, I burnt myself out doing all the hours, still trying to get some partying in. And all of a sudden, boom, I had a real point that I just had nothing left in the tank. So that was when I thought, what am I going to do now, kind of thing. And it brought me to a point that I was like, okay, so what do I love? What are the things that I love? A large part of my journey since probably just before my marriage ending, I turned to journaling.
Okay.
It was something I discovered around that time. And oh my goodness, I've got stacks now. I absolutely love being able to write. Yeah, so that's been a really huge healing tool for me.
So that when your marriage ended, it sounds like that was the catalyst for the time you talked about setting goals, being more intentional, and then also this period of journaling and a lot of self-reflection.
And just realizing that there was something else, something more, that, to be able to look out at the sea and go, seeing its true beauty and magnificence, and how, like we said right at the start, how powerful it is. There's got to be something more.
What I'm hearing you say is that up until that point, your life was largely centered around things that were on the outside of you. And then you came to learn to turn inward.
And totally, that's boom, yeah.
I feel like that's a shift that's very common around that time. I had a similar shift. I feel like there's a lot of people, you go from living from the outside in to the inside out.
To the inside, yeah. And I talk about that, on my website. I sort of say, I was chasing all the external validation. I had the family home and the car and the
Well, you were
career.
getting it. You were getting it.
That was, yeah.
You're getting the external validation.
And I finally got the real estate title, which is,
Yeah.
I finally had a title that I felt proud of, and I could say, hold my hand up and say, hey, I'm a real estate agent. Boom, the universe had other ideas for me.
Yeah. But that happens is sometimes you'll have that kind of a goal, you'll reach the goal, and then you're like, oh, all right, now what?
What was I thinking?
Right.
But part of that actually was sitting down with my boss when I went into real estate. I remember just him and I, and it feels honestly like a soulmate to me. We've had a really close friendship. He said, what are your goals? And I went, what do you mean? What's a goal? And this was me in my 40s. And I did not have any idea what he was talking about. He said, the things you want to do. And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, well, come on, let's think of some things. Let's write some things down. And I was like, he goes, what do you love? And I said, oh, dolphins. He's like, okay, so what is it about dolphins? And I had swum with dolphins years prior. And then I came across a retreat that offered yoga, surfing, and swimming with the dolphins. And I was like, oh my God, there's things like that exist. That's what I want. I want to do that,
Okay.
So all of a sudden he opened my eyes to what else was possible and what I could do and what were my dreams and visions. And at the time it was more goals, but since then it's expanded more into dreams and visions and desires.
And it feels like, and things that are fulfilling, because you can do all kinds of things that make you happy and you can have a lot of fun, but the things that are really going to be fulfilling are different. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Do you surf, by the way?
I have given it a go many years ago, but it was something I said in my 50s.
You're going to learn?
To do.
All right. I want to see pictures
who knows?
Of you surfing. When I think of New Zealand, like, does everyone surf in New Zealand? Because it's right there at the ocean. I feel like you're very lucky. I mean, there are a lot of people who, I know, like later in life, they move to the beach finally. It's like one of those things that you're like, well, where have you always wanted to live? And it takes your whole life to get there.
Funny story kind of around manifesting was, I remember when I left. So my ex and I stayed in the house for a year together. Well, we were living in the same house. And then a year after that, and even when, the day he left, we had 70 steps up to our house and we had the most amazing view over the harbour. I was walking up and he was walking down, and that was his kind of absolute leaving. And we stopped in the middle and we hugged and we said, bye. We've got a pretty amicable relationship. So my daughter and I stayed in the house for a year after that. And then we sold, and I said, I want to be near water. And the first place we moved into, the first day, put the washing machine on, came back to the laundry to find, couple of centimeters of water on the floor.
Oh no, got to be in the water.
Put the dishwasher on. Every time I used the dishwasher, it was flooding the cupboard underneath the sink. In the bathroom, every time you used the basin in the bathroom, the water was coming through the cupboard below. And I was saying to my daughter, what are you doing every time after you brush your teeth? There's water everywhere. Only to realize that there was something wrong with the plumbing. Then and this was just gradually happening. It was an apartment, and there was an apartment above us. The water started coming through from their bathroom into our bathroom and down the walls. And I'd gone to see a friend who's a psychic medium, and I said to her, I don't know what's going on. Since I've moved into this house, there's just been this constant water. And she said, what did you ask for? And I said, I wanted to be near water. She says, Fiona, you've got to get more specific.
Yeah. I love that. Oh my gosh. You better be careful what you say.
Yeah. Well, because then the next house, I said, I wanted a view, but I didn't specify what of, but it was of the bush. Then I was like, right, okay, this next house, what is it I want? And I asked for a sea view, which I got. The beautiful thing about this place we moved into was when my mum passed, I'd asked for a sign from my mum, and I was down at the beach and I looked out, and her name was Vivian, and I looked out and there was this flock of birds just formed in the shape of a V. And so that's been kind of her sign,
Yeah.
And I'd been to this house many times and I'd never noticed, but there was this fence all around, and on this fence were birds in a V. And I just walked in and I said, I don't even need to look. I just know I'm meant to be here. So that was pretty cool.
I love
and
that.
Then the next time I moved, I said, I want to be overlooking the sea. And I am literally overlooking. I was specific.
Wow.
And I live overlooking the sea. So yeah, big lessons and all of that.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And so now, are you just only doing this work now, this type of visionary coaching work?
Yeah, I started out, I came together with what are the things that I love, like photography and writing and being in nature and having time freedom and all
Mm-hmm.
the things, and helping people was a very big part of what I love. And so that's how I sort of came to life coaching, and I went on and did a life coaching course with Beautiful You. So it's very much heart-centered
Mm-hmm.
rather than sort of head. I learned a lot through it, and it was a lot of personal growth within the training as well. Part of it was I felt like I needed this certificate to show that I was qualified.
Worth.
We learn so
It proves your worth, right?
worth,
That
yeah.
certificate.
And
You need that piece of
yeah,
paper.
but we learn so much through our life lessons and experiences that we don't really need a certificate.
We're qualified
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
lot of
I
things.
believe so. Yeah.
Yes.
So I did that and started my coaching business. And then 2 years ago, I had a neck injury, which I'd had after the mugging. I had ongoing neck pain with this other neck injury 2 years ago, which was kind of in between lockdowns of COVID. I've been experiencing just debilitating pain. So I've had to learn to do what I can when I can because of the fatigue that it brings as well. So it's for me, I've had to learn what brings me joy, what lights me up, to live my life in a way that's in alignment with who I am. I know so much more of who I am, my values, what I want to bring to the world. Yeah, it's come to a point that I'm getting better. I never saw it as being such a long recovery process, but that time has been very healing as well.
Yeah, well,
Me.
sometimes it's telling you to slow down. Something's telling you to. And it's interesting that that's the neck, the throat. It's like that whole area of, there's something there. I don't know what it is, but there are lessons for you.
And it's interesting because I feel it is a lot about me speaking up, because I don't even go live on posts on social media because I just don't feel ready to do that yet.
But you are speaking on your podcast.
But I am speaking on my podcast because I'm not. Yeah. And even that is, the podcast I do with Shez, who and I met through our life coaching training. And even though, we look back now at the first one and we go, oh my goodness, but here we are, two 50-year-old plus women. We were just having a conversation one day and we're like, why don't we start a podcast? Because we both believe in the absolute power of storytelling, hearing other people's experiences, what they've been through, how they got through. And it just gives, maybe just gives somebody a bit of hope wherever they are on their journeys. And so then we started interviewing other people, and I just love hearing people's stories and what's made them who they are, what choices they've made on their life path.
Exactly. It's inspiring. And it makes you feel your humanity, and it makes you feel connected, because there has been so much separation in the entire world. It's been an extraordinary past few years. And so people are craving connection more than ever. And storytelling is a wonderful tool to bring people together. So I love that you're doing that too. So how's the podcast going?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's been a really like a period of growth for, like we're talking about me expressing myself. And it's allowing me to use my voice to give me the confidence to speak up more and to say more of what I want to say, rather than hold back and go, oh no, I can't be saying that. What's somebody going to think? I've that has been a large part of my journey, has been, oh, what are people going to think? And so I've dimmed myself down, and that's probably why I've got so much pain in my body. My body's like, I've learned so much about my body through the pain as well. And that what's my body trying to tell me? Our bodies speak to us all the time. And it's taking the time to tune in. I talk about tap in, tune in, and turn on, because when we spoke before about coming to an inner journey, going within, and I often say go within, I think, do people actually know what that means?
I think they do. I mean, the thing that strikes me about what, as you talk, is when you are someone who is very tuned in, because I'm this way as well, you start to notice things, and maybe things start to bother you more in your physical, like maybe pain or twinges or, sensations in the body. You feel them more because you are so tuned in. And I don't know what that's, trying to tell you. Or it's funny because we have a lot of similarities, because I have the same thing going on, kind of similar thing with my neck, and I've been wondering, what's it trying to tell me? What do I need to learn from this, and how can I resolve it? Because our tendency is just to want it to go away. Well, I have a pain. Let me fix it. Let me figure out how to make it go away. I don't know. Are you familiar with the work of Louise Hay?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Because she talks a lot about how to resolve issues with affirmations for certain parts of the body.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation with my sister, and she lives overseas.
By the way, I have to say, not to interrupt you, but it's very interesting that you say overseas, because I think when you live in New Zealand, everything is overseas, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, she lives in the islands in the Pacific with one running tap, and the absolute village over there does all the washing in the river, and yeah, quite phenomenal. Her and I were having the conversation just recently, and we're talking about, she was asking how my neck was, and she said she'd had pain, some sort of pain. And I said to her, have you ever come across Louise Hay? And she said no. And so I sort of, started telling her about Louise's work and the amazing things she'd done in her life. Then the next day she texted me and she sent me a photo, and she said, I was just in the shop in the islands, like there's not many shops over there. And she said, and I found this book.
Or it found her.
Yeah. And it was How to Heal Your Life by Louise Hay.
Yeah.
And I went, oh yes, that's the one.
That's the one.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
And again, I don't know, there's something about you that's magical, Fiona. You say something and it happens.
Oh, yeah. And that's what I've become sort of now, where I'm on my journey. I'm like, let's create magic, because I've been through the hard yards.
We can. We can.
Yeah. And it's like we've forgotten that.
Well, we have to tap into it. It's like you have to you just have to get on the right frequency with
frequency for it. Yeah. So that's what I'm all about now. I'm about, let's create magic and miracles. Let's expect them, not there's something that happened, to somebody else. Or
it's not a fluke. It's the natural order of things when those things happen.
Yeah. And let's, dream really big. Anything's possible when we open to it. And, the opportunities and the possibilities and the potential of how our lives can be is just vast. It's infinite,
unlimited. So what are your dreams?
Well, funny you asked that. I've got a few actually, and I'll put them out there because a lot of people keep their dreams secret, but there is such power in either writing them down or speaking them out. One of my dreams is to, as I say, I've always loved property. I would love to build a property. What I see it as being is like a haven by the beach for women to be able to gather, to dance, sing, laugh, grow, heal, have healing modalities, do yoga, meditation, whatever is needed. And it'll be by the sea and overlook the sea. So that's one of them. And last night, I couldn't sleep. It was about 11 o'clock. And I thought, oh my goodness, I better get to sleep. I'm talking with Mitzi in the morning. I recently did a guided meditation, and it took you on this journey of looking through 3 different doors. And one was pink, one was emerald green, and I can't remember what was particularly behind those doors, but then the third door it took you to the journey on was a gold door, and it was this whole open the door, and what's behind the door, what's your life going to be kind of thing. And I saw myself speaking on stage. I can't even believe I'm saying this.
Wouldn't that be ironic if this has been trying to tell you from birth that is your purpose? Yeah. And so I turned my light back on. It just came to me last night. I just thought I meant to be speaking on stage. I went, what the? And I saw this whole vision of it. So I got out my journal and I just wrote. It's very much, like a channel, and I just have to let this stuff flow out of me. And I wrote sort of 7 pages of words of the speech that I will give on stage. And I was like, what? This is just unexpected. I didn't see this coming right now. But it's me as sort of the future version of me, but speaking from now of what will happen in that moment. So I'll keep you posted. I cannot wait. I have absolutely no doubt that you're going to come back and say, well, here I am. You heard it first. but it feels like, doing podcasts, like creating our own podcast and being here speaking with you and others that I've been doing. They're all the stepping stones to maybe getting me to that stage. Exactly. Each time you say yes, you're opening door to those new opportunities and possibilities, and you just don't know what's
what's behind those doors.
You can't be afraid to open them and step through. So because we're on the Blessings podcast, we have to talk about the lessons and the blessings that you see as you look back and all the things that we talked about. So what would you say are your biggest lessons from your life?
The biggest one would definitely be self-love.
Have you achieved it?
I'm pretty,
Is it something you get to achieve an end point with, or is it ongoing?
I don't think it's that. I think it's something that's more ongoing. I don't think it's something tangible you can say. And we're always constantly growing and evolving, so it will change right throughout my life. But it's definitely self-love has been my biggest lesson. Learning, to be able to actually look in the mirror and say, "I love you."
Do you do that?
Not often enough. But I remember doing, starting with Mel Robbins and doing the high five to the mirror.
Well, that's Louise Hay was the original mirror work. She talks about that.
Yes.
Actually looking in the mirror and saying, "I love you."
And doing that and actually being able to look into your own eyes. I love looking into other people's eyes, and it took me a long time to learn to look into my own eyes. So
your own eyes.
So I'd say self-love and, loving and accepting myself.
Unconditionally.
No matter what, despite what's going on, I still see that there's a lesson in what my body's trying to tell me. I've gone through this for a reason. Who knows what it will bring.
So self-love. And are there any micro lessons or mini lessons that kind of lead up to that?
I think taking that time to tap in, tune in and turn on, and to get to know who you are. And
that's why we're here, to do that, to learn how to go through that process, to be able to do that,
and to be comfortable being with yourself in the stillness. For a long time I needed noise around me, and I needed people around me, and I wanted to be in the big cities, and now I'm just much more of a give me nature. And I'm in my happy place. I'm in my happy zone right now. I don't care what people think. For a long time I held myself back, I dimmed myself, I cut myself off from worrying about other people thinking of me.
So don't dim yourself, and don't don't worry about what other people think. Those are all great lessons. And it's so funny because those are lessons that we know, we think about them, but for some reason they don't always take. We know that we're supposed to love ourselves, and we know that we're supposed to not worry about what other people think, but these are lessons that are just, they have to be like continued to think about them over and over and over, and just, it's not like one and done.
But that's exactly what I was just going to say. It's not one and done. No, we're on the same frequency.
Yes, I think we are. It's kind of scary. I think we are. Oh my gosh. So what about the blessings? What are the biggest points of gratitude from your life?
At the moment, actually, I'm doing a 33-day gratitude practice with a friend of mine. So every morning we send each other 3 things that we're grateful for in our lives, because I believe it's one of the great things that if we see the blessings, that then where our eyes are open to seeing even more of them. I call it, my fireworks and flamingos, and people are like, what? But it's those things. We don't often see fireworks and flamingos, but what if we did? What if we were opened our eyes to seeing them? And now people go to me, I saw your fireworks and flamingos, so they're even open to seeing them. It's that whole, somebody buys a car and all of a sudden you see it everywhere. So gratitude, even though I'm not in my marriage anymore, I'm grateful for that relationship, because my daughter is a product. That's not probably the nicest word to use, but she came from that relationship, and she's, everything to me. She's just amazing. Even just the little things, blessings like where I live, waking up and being able to see the sea, being able to walk across the road and go for a beach walk. No matter what the weather, I'll be out there in the elements, connecting with the elements.
And you probably have a lot of beautiful shells there. When I was young, my aunt gave me a book called Gifts from the Sea. That's always stuck with me, because we were a family of shell gatherers as well, but we don't live by the beach.
The house I actually live in is called Shell Cottage, and there's shells everywhere, and I've got containers of shells, and I'm always coming home. Somebody was collecting money at the local store the other day, and I put my hand in my pocket and sorry, I've only got shells.
Mermaid money.
My dad actually, he became very creative in his later years. He was 40 when I was born, so when I say later years, and he made like stained glass windows and did wood turning and things like that. And so, and he collected shells, a particular shell called a cat's eye. I don't know if you get them over there.
I don't know. I'd have to see.
But they literally look like an eye on one side, and they come in all different colours. And then the other side has we call it a koru, but it's, like a coil. Yeah, my dad used to collect them, and now my daughter and I collect them, and it's just always a memory of him. Whenever I see them, I'm like, oh, thanks, Dad.
That's a way of connecting to your dad.
And I actually, something that I've become creative in my later years is making silver jewellery. And so I'm always like looking at things on the beach. What can I make with that? Or, like rings, or can I make that into a ring, make a bezel and put it into a ring? Just the whole, being able to have the lifestyle that I have. Yeah. Having chosen to create a job that I need to work from home because of my fatigue and things. So being able to do that's been a blessing.
It's interesting that you talk about your creative side. You have a lot of creativity as well for the
writing.
Yeah,
but that's come through more later, like literally in the last 10 years. The writing started in my journaling. It's not just releasing stuff, but it's also, I use it to create as well, ideas.
And you're getting these downloads that you're just like, they're coming through your fingers onto the page.
To the point that I've actually written a book.
When's that coming out?
Oh, no, I've got one out actually.
Oh, okay, you have one out.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, which is life lessons. But it's actually called Life Lessons and Teachings for Modern Midlife Women. So
there we go.
Everything we've been talking about.
Perfect.
And I've started a second book, and the first chapter is Lucky You, or they call it something about lucky. Okay. So that'll come out in time. But literally the words just flow through me, and I don't know where they come from. Well, you know.
Yeah.
They just flow.
Well, when you have an open mind and a pure spirit, and you're susceptible to these things, you're probably quite empathic too. Are you? Would you say that?
Very.
Beautiful. Let's kind of wrap it up with, maybe you could let us know what you think has been the meaning of your life.
Wow, the meaning of your life. It feels like beautiful. I mean, I'd say the lesson has been definitely the self-love, and the meaning for me now is, through everything that I've been through, is to help others on their journeys, because it's not always an easy road. I like to do things a little bit differently. I like to think outside the box, and I see that in a lot of people and clients, that very much in our language, the way we're talking. I was talking to somebody just yesterday, and they were going, oh, I was going to do this, but, and I was like, no. And, and it was about 3 different times. And I was like, she was just boxing herself in. And I was like, open the box, let it out, and I think I see people's potential that they don't see, and I believe in them, yet they don't believe in themselves. And so it's not only giving that to somebody else and helping them to see their own potential, to believe in themselves, to create their dreams and bring them to life. And when I say see the potential and believe in yourself, it's sort of a mirroring back to myself as well.
I was going to say, are you talking to yourself?
Yeah. It often happens, doesn't it? That
yes, it does.
Something you're saying is actually a message for yourself. Yeah,
that's right. That's a lot, and I love it. That's really what it's all about. We're connected. It goes back to the connection. It's all, what you see in others is you. We're one, and we're connected with it all. I love it. Oh
Great journey, isn't it?
It is perfectly imperfect, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Well, it has been so great. Thank you for spending so much time with me, and for being so vulnerable and going through all of the ups and downs, because I think that people are going to really relate to you and connect to these things. It's going to be so helpful for people who are on a journey going through similar things. And even if not, I think listening to other people's life stories is just so interesting. Even if you don't feel like you have anything in common with them specifically, you still have something in common with them, because it's your humanity, your shared humanity, which I love.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me on, and I look forward to hearing all your podcasts as it births out into the wild. Tell me about the name Blessons. Is it
Blessings? It's a combination of blessings and lessons.
Yes, yeah, I get
it's
it now.
It's a play on those words.